Welcome to What I Heard with Mehul Patel. And what I heard this week is that AI is already being used for interviewing candidates, and nobody knows if it's actually legal. I learned about this. I went to a panel discussion at NYU's law school. It was sponsored by the American Arbitration Association, and this was housed within the Employment Law Center at NYU, and it was all day. And I gotta say, if you're in arbitration, I would hope AI replaces your job because it sounds pretty boring, but there were actually some pretty interesting modules. And basically the most interesting was where they talked about how AI is already being used in the interviewing process. Not just analyzing your resumes and then setting up the logistics of the interview, but actually having an AI agent, in fact, conduct the interview, including evaluating your facial expressions. A Wall Street Journal reporter actually went through the process. They showed the video to all of us of this person doing it, and he scored like a 37% on the interview, and a lot of it was based on his facial expression. So yeah, if you are being interviewed by an AI agent, be careful about itching your face or smiling too much or smiling too little or raising your eyebrows or whatever the hell it is examining and auditing and taking a look at and deciding if you're a good candidate. You know, my question actually about that is, if they're already using a technology that can evaluate your facial expression, what about just evaluating your biometrics? Can they do that? Like, let's say you're a woman and you happen to be pregnant and you're not showing visibly that you're pregnant and you're on a job interview. Can they tell if you're pregnant and then make a decision? Hey, yeah, you know what? We're gonna have to give her maternity leave in, 8 months, let's maybe skip this candidate. Or, hey, this guy looks like he's pretty tired. Maybe he parties too much. He was out. He looks dehydrated. I think he had a little bit too much tequila last night. I don't think we like this guy. Are they going to go to that level? Because you have to assume that technology is out there. So I found that pretty fascinating. I found it fascinating that people are actually already using this and using facial expression recognition, or whatever you want to call it, as a tool to evaluate someone. Like, I think that's ridiculous. Just talk to the person, try to understand what their goals are, and match the candidate to the appropriate role or not. But to rely on things like facial expression, I thought that was pretty wild. What was also a little bit alarming was almost all the lawyers that sat on the panel basically said, hey, yeah, it's the Wild West. There's no real regulations in place. They had some law, I think it's called Local 144. I think that was the name of the law, where you had to do an audit of your AI protocol to make sure there isn't any inherent bias that's being generated within the AI structure. And it came back that only 4% are actually doing this. 4%. So that just means nobody's auditing their process. There could be a bias in there. It could be a bias in there that if you are a New York Knicks fan or a New York Jets fan, we're not hiring you. Being a Jets fan, I can kind of understand not hiring someone, but in all seriousness, it just seems like, yes, a definition of the Wild West with this technology seems appropriate, because they have nothing in place. I think that they have tried to say that, that you have to really put in some controls to make sure those biases don't happen, using plain language. And obviously there's concerns about privacy and all of these things, but there's really nothing that's uniform. It doesn't seem like there's any protocol at all, and I think that's why it is appropriate to say that it is the Wild West. The other part of this is the human bias actually still comes into AI, because the AI agent has been prompted by a human being. So if that human being actually has their own bias, well, it's just going to get amplified in here, right? Like that's what's going to happen. And then you have all of these vendors that are out there right now that provide some sort of product or whatever for a company to use to actually start to implement during the interviewing process. These vendors have no accountability. They aren't held responsible at all if the product creates a bias or doesn't actually find the best candidates. They're not really on the hook. It's almost like somebody, going to Washington Square Park in the 80s and buying a dime bag of cannabis and, oh yeah, shit, this is just oregano, right? This is the same thing. There is no pushback on the vendors. The vendors can basically sell a company a flawed product, and as it stands right now, based on what these lawyers and arbitrators were talking about, there really isn't much ability to push back against the vendors. So we might in fact have a lot of flawed products that are already out there and probably being used, which I thought was pretty alarming. One example was iTutor. They got sued a couple years back. It might have been in 2023 by the EOC, and while it wasn't a huge number, I think it was $365,000 was the settlement. What was happening is iTutor was using a AI agent, as I understood it from what the panel was saying, and it was essentially just not hiring or even interviewing anybody over a certain age. Like it was so obvious that the AI agent was doing this that they had to settle, because if they went to court, they would have lost, and they would probably lost for a larger number. So it goes back to, what I was saying, that, these vendors might be already putting products out there that aren't working. And that was like one of the first lawsuits from this. And they lost. So that's the other thing you got to weigh if you're a company. If you're in the C-suite, you have to start measuring, hey, are the cost savings we're going to get from using an AI agent to do our hiring instead of using a freaking human being to talk to another human being? Oh, wow, what a crazy concept that is. We're going to use an AI agent and end up losing more money in a lawsuit than the money we would save by using the agent in the first place. And I think that decision is going to start to happen all over the place. But beyond that, if an AI agent is being used, why wouldn't you sue every time you don't get the job interview? I mean, honestly, there's going to be a growing list of ambulance chasing lawyers, but they're going to be in the field of employment law. They're going to go try and find anybody who didn't get the job, whether they were qualified or not. Because now you can just blame AI and just say, hey, the thing tweaked out. All right? It tweaked out and it didn't hire my candidate, and we're going to sue. And so that's my prediction, is that part of the law sector is going to see a boom. Why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it? You have that in the world of insurance. You have tons of lawyers out there that are singularly designed to go and find people who've had a slip and fall. Whether that slip and fall was actually caused real damages, that lawyer is up in you and saying, hey, you know what, we can sue this department store because they should have, this wet spot that was there shouldn't have been there, and you've got pain and suffering damages. We all know about those attorneys. We see the commercials. Those commercials have been on TV since, I don't know, the 80s. Since I could watch television, they've been on. So I think we could see something similar here in the world of AI entering the job interviewing space. And it may end up being a net negative, not a net positive. Another interesting lawsuit was there was a pool of candidates that said that they went on countless interviews, over 100 interviews, did not get a single call back, did not get a single offer, and now they're suing because they're saying we gave them all of our data. These interviews, pre-screening, and then the interviews themselves were quite detailed, and what's going on with the data that they gave them. So now there's a privacy issue, and again, it just opens the door to new and creative lawsuits. So that I don't think has been calculated by the tech companies or the tech sector. They're just pushing out a product, and I don't think they really care about that. But if you're on the other side of that equation and you're a company and you're using this, you have to start considering that. And so I know that the headlines keep saying AI is going to replace jobs. Well, it's even more upstream. AI is deciding who even gets a chance at these jobs. I think that there's going to be some real pushback to this, not just because it's really bizarre to be interviewed by a robot. It's just going to open itself to a ton of lawsuits. I could see this proliferating because people take it personally when they don't get a job offer. That's just the human nature of all of us. It's, hey, I went through the process, I didn't get the job. I don't know how you don't take that personally. I know I always did. I would get annoyed if I didn't get the job. Even if it wasn't even a job that I really wanted, I'd still be like, yeah, what the fuck? You're not going to give me an offer? And that emotion, I think, could create liability for companies if they're not careful. And if you're starting to implement these products, these AI products, without that mindset, I don't know. On a broader human point, can we just not be so lazy? How about just interview people face to face? How about actually read their freaking resume? And I mean, if you don't have time to do that, I don't understand what your human resources department is there for. It's not as if we haven't had the ability to do this in the past. I think, okay, maybe have a better screening process up front. Use AI for resumes that come in. There's clearly going to be some people that aren't qualified. But to be honest with you, I have done hiring. And when I put up a post, yeah, I'm shocked at how many resumes we get. But I got to be honest with you. It takes about 8 seconds or less to throw out the ones that are totally not qualified. It really takes that long because there's a lot of people that don't read the job description or they're just blasting out their resume. It doesn't take a days and days to go through resumes. It takes an hour of time. So, there's a point that I think that you're trying to be efficient to a point of idiotic levels of metrics. So while the rest of the conference was quite boring, I have to say, they were talking about such technical things, and it might just have been that it was over my head. This particular part, what I heard, it was a little disturbing in the sense that it feels like Skynet, the Terminator, and you got to talk to AI, but I actually think the fact that culturally in America, we love to sue and we love to win lawsuits is actually going to be the barrier that forces better products and companies to think twice about using an AI agent to interview people. And on that note, I will see you next week. I'll be going to a bunch of panels and conferences in New York, so you don't have to. Have a great week.